Welcome. What if an ordinary Washington quarter you've seen countless times holds details that most people never notice? Today, we're taking a closer look at what separates everyday pocket change from the rare collector-worthy examples, and why a few authenticated coins have captured so much attention among numismatists. First coin. Few American coins have been pulled from pocket change more often while being misunderstood than the 1976 United States bicentennial quarter. At first glance, it appears to be an ordinary Washington quarter with an unusual dual date, yet that single design change marked one of the largest commemorative coin programs in American history. Millions of people saved these coins believing they would become instant treasures, while others spent them without a second thought, creating a fascinating divide between sentiment and true numismatic value. Today, decades after the celebration of America's 200th anniversary, collectors continue searching through old jars, inherited collections, bank rolls, and estate holdings, hoping to discover an exceptional example hiding among common circulation pieces. As this story unfolds, you'll discover why some bicentennial quarters remain worth only face value, while authenticated high-grade examples, important varieties, and remarkable mint errors have attracted impressive collector attention, along with what verified examples have actually sold for and the critical factors that determine their market value. The origin of the bicentennial quarter reaches back to the approaching celebration of the Declaration of Independence in 1976, a milestone that inspired Congress to authorize a temporary redesign of circulating American coinage. Rather than issuing an entirely new denomination, the United States Mint chose to commemorate the nation's bicentennial by altering the reverse designs of the quarter, half dollar, and dollar, while preserving George Washington's familiar portrait on the obverse. The unusual dual date, 1776-1976, symbolized the 2 centuries separating the birth of the United States from its bicentennial celebration. Although many people assume these quarters were struck only during 1976, production actually began in 1975 because no quarters dated simply 1975 were issued for circulation. Every quarter produced during that transition carried the dual date, making the bicentennial issue instantly recognizable. It represented far more than a commemorative keepsake. It reflected a nation looking back at its revolutionary origins while emerging from a turbulent era shaped by the Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, inflation, energy shortages, and widespread economic uncertainty. The coin quietly became a daily reminder of resilience and national identity, passing through millions of American hands during one of the country's most challenging decades. The bicentennial quarter's appearance was carefully planned to balance tradition with celebration. The obverse retained the familiar portrait of George Washington, originally introduced in 1932 and based on the work of sculptor John Flanagan, preserving continuity with previous quarters while allowing the reverse to carry the commemorative message. The reverse itself resulted from a nationwide design competition won by Jack L.R., whose colonial drummer standing beside a victory torch surrounded by 13 stars immediately captured the patriotic spirit of the American Revolution. The design symbolized ordinary citizens answering the call for independence rather than focusing solely on famous political leaders. Every detail was intended to evoke determination, sacrifice, and unity. The inscriptions, United States of America, quarter dollar, EPLUBUSUNUM, and the dual date completed a design that became one of the most recognizable commemorative circulating coins ever produced. Standard circulation examples were struck on the familiar copper-nickel-clad planchet, composed of outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin a total weight of approximately 5.67 grams, a diameter of 24.3 millimeters, and a reeded edge with 119 reeds. Special collector editions were also produced in 40% silver-clad composition, creating another layer of interest for collectors seeking complete bicentennial sets. Production occurred at 3 United States Mint facilities, each playing a distinct role in the series. Philadelphia struck coins without a mint mark, Denver produced coins bearing the D mint mark, and San Francisco manufactured both proof coins and special collector issues identified by the S mint mark. Combined circulation mintage exceeded 1.5 billion pieces, making the bicentennial quarter one of the most heavily produced quarters in American history. Such enormous production explains why most circulated examples remain common despite their historical significance. However, the overall mintage figure often creates a misleading impression that every bicentennial quarter is equally abundant. In reality, exceptional preservation dramatically changes the picture. Coins that escaped circulation immediately after striking retained their original mint luster, and avoided contact marks are considerably scarcer than their total mintage suggests. Even among mint state examples, strike quality varies substantially because worn dies and high-speed production occasionally produced softer details on the drummer, Washington's hair, and other high points. Collectors therefore evaluate each specimen individually rather than assuming all examples from a particular mint possess identical quality. This careful examination helps explain why certified mint state coins can command far stronger premiums than ordinary circulated pieces despite sharing the same date and mint mark. Condition remains the single greatest factor separating an ordinary bicentennial quarter from a highly desirable collectible. Professional grading services carefully evaluate surface preservation, luster, strike sharpness, eye appeal, and originality before assigning a numerical grade on the internationally recognized Sheldon scale. Lower circulated grades generally show noticeable wear across Washington's portrait and the drummer's details, while about uncirculated examples retain most original luster with only slight friction. Mint state coins display no evidence of circulation, but differences between MS63, MS65, MS66, MS67, and higher become increasingly significant because each grade represents progressively fewer surviving examples. Collectors also pay close attention to the coin's color and surface quality. Copper-nickel-clad quarters should exhibit natural silver-gray brilliance without artificial cleaning, polishing, or chemical alteration. Harsh cleaning often leaves fine scratches or unnatural brightness that permanently reduces collector demand. For silver-clad collector issues, attractive original tunning can actually increase desirability when it develops naturally over decades. In today's market, a certified mint state example with exceptional eye appeal might bring roughly $1,250 to $2,300 depending on its certified grade, while another coin from the same year but with heavier contact marks or weaker luster could realize only a fraction of that amount. These differences illustrate why careful grading matters far more than simply identifying the date. Beyond condition, specialized collectors devote enormous attention to mint errors and die varieties, areas where genuinely scarce bicentennial quarters can become remarkably valuable. Double die varieties, although requiring expert verification, may display noticeable doubling in selected inscriptions or design elements. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, wrong planchet errors, and dramatic die breaks also attract significant interest when authenticated. Some quarters were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or foreign coinage, creating unusual combinations of weight, color, and diameter that immediately stand out during examination. Because counterfeit error coins and altered pieces exist, experienced collectors rely on accurate measurements using precision digital scales, calipers, and magnet tests, while ultimately seeking confirmation from respected third-party grading services. Authentication protects buyers from altered coins in which mint marks have been added, surfaces manipulated, or ordinary damage, misrepresented as valuable mint errors. Verified examples with significant production errors have realized collector prices in the neighborhood of $2,900 to $3,800, depending on the rarity of the error, certification, and overall eye appeal. These premiums are not based on the dual date alone, but on the extraordinary circumstances surrounding a coin's production and preservation. Some of the most talked about bicentennial quarter sales involve certified registry quality coins that represent the absolute finest known survivors. These extraordinary pieces often spent virtually no time in circulation, preserving blazing original luster and exceptionally sharp details that distinguish them from ordinary examples. When elite collectors compete to own the highest-ranked certified specimens for registry collections, bidding can rise well beyond the levels seen for typical mint-state coins. There have also been authenticated auction records for exceptionally rare high-grade examples and unusual mint errors that reached figures dramatically exceeding normal collector expectations. Those headline-making results should never be interpreted as applying to every bicentennial quarter carrying the same dual date. Instead, they demonstrate how rarity, population reports, grading standards, and market competition intersect. A coin certified at the very top of the grading scale may represent only a tiny fraction of all surviving examples, making it fundamentally different from the countless circulated quarters still found in collections. Serious buyers examine certification numbers, auction pedigrees, provenance, and population data before making significant purchases, because even a single grading point can influence value by thousands of dollars in the upper tiers of the market. Preserving a bicentennial quarter properly is just as important as discovering one. Collectors generally recommend handling coins only by their edges to prevent fingerprints and skin oils from affecting the surfaces. Coins should never be cleaned with cloths, chemicals, baking soda, or household products, since even well-intentioned cleaning can create microscopic scratches that permanently lower collector value. Instead, potentially valuable examples are best stored in inert archival holders, mylar flips, acid-free cardboard holders, or hard plastic capsules designed specifically for long-term coin preservation. Stable temperature, low humidity, and protection from airborne contaminants help preserve original surfaces for future generations. Before assuming that any bicentennial quarter is rare, owners should compare weight, diameter, composition, strike characteristics, and mint mark with verified references, and consider professional authentication if the coin appears unusually well preserved or displays a possible error. The enduring appeal of the 1976 bicentennial quarter lies not in guaranteed wealth, but in its remarkable ability to connect American history, artistic design, and numismatic scholarship within a single circulating coin. For collectors, every authenticated high-grade survivor represents a preserved fragment of the nation's bicentennial celebration, reminding us that true value is determined by rarity, condition, originality, and informed evaluation rather than by the date alone. Next coin. Few American coins transformed the hobby of coin collecting as dramatically as the 1965 Washington quarter. At first glance, it looks almost identical to the quarters that came before it, and millions still circulate unnoticed in old collections, forgotten drawers, and inherited coin albums. Yet this single year represents one of the most significant turning points in the history of modern United States coinage. It marked the beginning of a new era driven by economic pressure, changing precious metal markets, and an urgent need to keep coins flowing through everyday commerce. Because of that unique place in history, the 1965 quarter has become a fascinating target for collectors, particularly those searching for exceptional survivors, unusual varieties, and authenticated mint errors. As this story unfolds, you'll discover why certain examples have attracted remarkable collector interest, what characteristics specialists examine before assigning a premium, and what authenticated pieces have brought in the marketplace under the right conditions. The story begins during one of the most challenging periods for American coinage. By the early 1960s, the rising price of silver created an unexpected crisis. The intrinsic value of the silver contained in circulating dimes, quarters, and half dollars was approaching, and at times exceeding, their face value, encouraging the public to hoard coins rather than spend them. At the same time, demand for circulating coinage was increasing as the nation's economy expanded. Banks struggled to obtain enough change, businesses experienced shortages, and rumors spread that newly minted coins would eventually become valuable collectibles. Congress, responded by passing the Coinage Act of 1965, one of the most important monetary reforms in modern American history. The legislation eliminated silver from circulating quarters and dimes, replacing the traditional 90% silver composition with a copper core bonded between outer layers of copper and nickel. The law was designed not to create a collectible coin, but to solve a nationwide shortage, ensuring that everyday commerce could continue without interruption while preserving the nation's supply of precious metal. Although the design remained familiar, the 1965 Washington quarter quietly introduced several important changes beneath its surface. The obverse continued to feature George Washington's left-facing portrait created by sculptor John Flanagan, whose design had first appeared on the quarter in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth. Surrounding the portrait are the inscriptions "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date 1965, maintaining continuity with earlier issues despite the dramatic change in composition. The reverse also retained Flanagan's heraldic eagle with outstretched wings perched upon a bundle of arrows framed by olive branches, symbolizing both military preparedness and the nation's desire for peace. While collectors often focus on visual design, the hidden transformation occurred inside the coin itself. Instead of solid silver, the new quarter consisted of outer layers made from 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a nearly pure copper center. The coin maintained its familiar diameter of 24.3 millimeters, a weight of approximately 5.67 grams, and a reeded edge, allowing vending machines, cash registers, and the public to continue using the new quarters without significant adjustment. Production methods also reflected the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the coin shortage. During 1965, the United States Mint temporarily suspended the use of mint marks on circulating coins in an effort to discourage collectors from searching for specific facilities and removing coins from circulation. As a result, every regular 1965 Washington quarter lacks a mint mark regardless of whether it was struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. Dies were prepared centrally and distributed among mint facilities, making individual production locations impossible to identify from the coins themselves. Combined production exceeded 1.8 billion quarters, an astonishing figure that illustrates the government's determination to restore an adequate coin supply. High-speed manufacturing placed enormous demands on dies, and many examples exhibit varying strike quality, particularly in Washington's hair, the eagle's feathers, and the finer details of the reverse. Although the date itself is common, sharply struck examples displaying full original mint luster and minimal contact marks are considerably more difficult to locate than raw mintage numbers might suggest, especially after decades of circulation. That distinction between ordinary and exceptional preservation explains why professional grading plays such a central role in today's collector market. Most surviving 1965 quarters entered circulation immediately and accumulated wear through everyday use, reducing both eye appeal and collector desirability. Professional grading services evaluate each coin according to the Sheldon numerical scale, examining luster, strike quality, surface preservation, originality, and overall visual appeal. Lower circulated grades often display flattened hair above Washington's ear, softened lettering, and worn feathers on the eagle's wings, while about uncirculated pieces retain traces of original brilliance with only slight friction. True mint state coins show no evidence of circulation, yet even among uncirculated examples, substantial differences exist between grades such as MS-64, MS-66, and the elusive highest certified levels. A certified gem quality example with exceptional eye appeal, original surfaces, and strong luster may command approximately $1,180 to $2,450 in the collector market, while another coin from the same year but with inferior preservation may bring only a modest premium over face value. Those differences illustrate why authentication, condition, originality, and market demand matter far more than the date alone. Beyond standard grading, experienced specialists devote considerable attention to varieties and genuine mint errors that can dramatically increase collector interest. The 1965 Washington Quarter is known to exist with several documented error types, including off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, and occasional double-die characteristics that require careful expert verification. Because high-speed production involved enormous output, isolated striking mistakes inevitably escaped into circulation. However, authentic examples remain relatively scarce, and many damaged coins are mistakenly advertised as valuable mint errors despite having suffered post-mint damage. Professional authentication becomes especially important because altered coins, artificially created errors, and counterfeit pieces occasionally appear in the marketplace. Collectors often verify weight, diameter, edge construction, magnetic response, and microscopic design details before considering a significant purchase. Depending upon the rarity of the authenticated error, overall preservation, certification, and collector competition, certain verified mint error examples have realized prices ranging from roughly $2,700 to $3,950. These results apply only to genuine, professionally authenticated pieces and should never be interpreted as typical values for ordinary 1965 quarters found in circulation. The strongest auction performances generally belong to coins that combine multiple desirable characteristics, including outstanding preservation, superior strike quality, original surfaces, and exceptionally low certified populations. Registry collectors competing to assemble the finest known sets frequently pursue these elite examples because population reports show that only a very limited number survive at the highest mint state grades. Even a single grading point can significantly influence desirability when only a handful of comparable specimens exist. Some remarkable auction records have also involved unusual mint errors or extraordinary condition rarities certified by respected third-party grading services. Those headline results should be viewed within their proper context, however. They represent coins that stand apart from the overwhelming majority of surviving examples through a combination of rarity, preservation, certification, provenance, and sustained collector demand. No reputable numismatist would suggest that every 1965 Washington Quarter shares the same potential simply because it carries the same date. Careful examination, accurate grading, and reliable authentication remain the foundation of responsible valuation. The enduring legacy of the 1965 Washington Quarter extends well beyond its role as the first circulating clad quarter in American history. It represents a defining moment when the United States fundamentally changed its coinage in response to economic realities, permanently ending an era in which everyday quarters contained substantial silver. For collectors, that historical transition gives the coin lasting importance regardless of its individual market value. Preserving potential collectible examples properly is essential. Coins should always be handled by their edges, stored in inert archival holders or hard plastic capsules, and protected from humidity, fingerprints, and harsh cleaning, all of which can permanently diminish originality and collector appeal. Abrasive polishing or chemical cleaning should never be attempted, as these practices often reduce value rather than improve appearance. As interest in modern United States coinage continues to grow, the finest authenticated 1965 quarters remain highly sought after because they preserve both an important chapter of American monetary history and the remarkable craftsmanship required to survive decades virtually untouched. Their appeal ultimately rests not on speculation, but on documented rarity, certified quality, historical significance, and the enduring fascination of collectors who continue searching for the very best examples more than half a century after they were struck. Next up. At first glance, the 1967 Washington Quarter without a mint mark seems almost too ordinary to deserve a second look. It carries no silver shine, no commemorative design, and no obvious clue that separates it from millions of other quarters that passed through cash registers during the late 1960s. Yet experienced collectors rarely dismiss this coin so quickly. Instead, they slow down, rotate it beneath a light, study the lettering, examine the texture of the surfaces, and pay close attention to details that most people overlook. That careful inspection is what transforms an ordinary piece of pocket change into an intriguing numismatic investigation. Hidden within this seemingly common issue are important clues about one of the most dramatic periods in modern American coinage, and by the time this examination is complete, you'll understand why certain authenticated examples command extraordinary respect among collectors, what characteristics specialists search for before assigning significant value, and why only a small percentage of surviving coins ever reach the highest levels of collector demand. The investigation begins with the economic turmoil of the mid-1960s, when the United States faced a nationwide coin shortage unlike anything experienced in previous decades. Rising silver prices encouraged people to remove older 90% silver coins from circulation, while growing commerce created even greater demand for small change. The Coinage Act of 1965 fundamentally changed American coin production by eliminating silver from circulating quarters and replacing it with a copper core bonded to outer layers of copper and nickel. The government also adopted an unusual policy intended to discourage collecting from circulation. From 1965 through 1967, regular circulating coins were struck without mint marks, regardless of whether they were produced in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. That decision explains why every genuine circulation strike 1967 Washington quarter lacks a mint mark. Rather than identifying a specific mint facility, the missing mint mark reflects a temporary nationwide policy designed to keep coins moving through the economy instead of disappearing into private collections. Understanding that historical context is the first step in recognizing why the coin occupies such an important place in modern United States numismatic history. With that background established, attention naturally shifts to the coin itself. The obverse features George Washington's familiar left-facing portrait designed by sculptor John Flanagan, whose work first appeared on the quarter in 1932. Above Washington appears the word Liberty, while In God We Trust rests to the left of the portrait, and the date 1967 appears below. Turning the coin over reveals the heraldic eagle standing proudly upon a bundle of arrows framed by olive branches, a design intended to balance military strength with the nation's commitment to peace. Although the artwork remained unchanged from earlier years, the composition represented an entirely new generation of American coinage. Instead of solid silver, the quarter was struck on a clad planchet consisting of outer layers made from 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a nearly pure copper center. The coin weighs approximately 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and carries a reeded edge. These specifications allowed the new clad quarters to function seamlessly alongside earlier silver issues in vending machines and commercial equipment, while dramatically reducing production costs at a time when precious metals had become too expensive for everyday circulation. Experienced collectors rarely stop after identifying the date and confirming the absence of a mint mark. The next stage of the investigation focuses on strike quality and surface preservation because these characteristics often separate ordinary examples from highly desirable ones. During the late 1960s, the mint produced enormous numbers of quarters under tremendous pressure to relieve the nationwide coin shortage. As a result, striking quality was not perfectly consistent. Some coins display softer details in Washington's hair, the eagle's breast feathers, and portions of the lettering, while others emerged from fresh dyes with unusually crisp definition and brilliant mint luster. Original luster, created during the striking process by microscopic metal flow lines, becomes one of the first features specialists evaluate. They also examine whether the surfaces retain their natural silver-gray appearance or show evidence of cleaning, polishing, discoloration, or environmental damage. Even subtle differences in eye appeal can dramatically influence collector demand, because high-grade examples preserving full originality become increasingly difficult to locate after decades of circulation and storage. Condition then becomes the centerpiece of the investigation. Professional grading services evaluate every significant detail using the Sheldon scale, assigning numerical grades that reflect preservation, strike, luster, and overall visual quality. Most surviving 1967 quarters circulated extensively and now exhibit flattened high points, reduced brilliance, contact marks, and worn design elements. Coins grading fine or very fine remain historically interesting, but generally are not considered condition rarities. As the grade rises into about uncirculated and mint state territory, however, surviving populations decline sharply. Collectors searching for premium examples want coins displaying strong original luster, minimal abrasions, sharply defined lettering, and excellent eye appeal. A certified mint state coin meeting these demanding standards may attract offers in the neighborhood of approximately $1,350 to $2,650, depending upon certification, originality, strike quality, and current collector demand. Those figures do not apply to every 1967 quarter, but instead reflect the reality that preservation plays a far greater role than the date itself. The investigation therefore shifts from simply identifying the coin to determining precisely how well it has survived. Once condition has been evaluated, specialists begin searching for something even more elusive: documented mint errors and recognized die varieties. Genuine errors from the United States Mint remain highly collectible because they provide direct evidence of unusual events during the manufacturing process. For the 1967 Washington quarter, authenticated off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, and certain double die characteristics are among the error categories that have been documented, although each requires careful expert verification. Collectors approach dramatic claims cautiously because post-mint damage is often mistaken for valuable production mistakes. Authentication involves confirming the correct weight, diameter, edge characteristics, metallic composition, and design details while comparing the coin against known error references. Counterfeit and altered pieces occasionally appear in the marketplace, making certification by respected third-party grading companies especially important before substantial money changes hands. Verified error examples displaying significant and unquestionably genuine production anomalies have realized prices ranging roughly from $2,900 to nearly $4,000 in appropriate market conditions. But those premiums belong only to authenticated errors with strong collector appeal rather than ordinary circulation strikes. The investigation eventually reaches the auction records and registry collections where the finest known survivors compete for attention. Here, collectors discover that rarity is often defined not by total mintage, but by surviving quality. More than 1.5 billion circulation strike quarters dated 1967 were produced, making the issue common in absolute numbers. Yet very few survive decades without acquiring the tiny marks, abrasions, and handling damage that inevitably accompany circulation and storage. Registry set collectors compete intensely for certified examples occupying the highest numerical grades because population reports show only a limited number achieving those elite designations. Extraordinary auction performances have occurred when exceptional preservation combines with outstanding strike quality or an important authenticated error. But such results belong exclusively to coins verified by professional grading services and should never be interpreted as representative of every 1967 quarter lacking a mint mark. Responsible numismatists always emphasize provenance, certification, population data, and market demand rather than relying on sensational headlines or unsupported online claims. By the conclusion of a careful examination, the 1967 Washington quarter reveals itself as far more than another piece of pocket change from the late 20th century. It serves as tangible evidence of a pivotal transition in American monetary history, capturing the moment when the United States permanently moved away from silver circulating quarters in response to changing economic realities. For collectors, preserving that history requires proper care. Coins should always be handled by their edges, stored in inert archival holders or hard plastic capsules, and protected from humidity, fingerprints, chemical exposure, and abrasive cleaning, all of which can permanently reduce originality and collector appeal. Any coin that appears unusually well struck, remarkably well preserved, or potentially displays a genuine mint error deserves careful examination, and when appropriate, professional authentication before assumptions about value are made. The enduring fascination surrounding the 1967 Washington quarter comes not from guaranteed profits, but from the satisfaction of understanding its historical significance, recognizing subtle differences in preservation and manufacture, and appreciating how informed observation transforms an ordinary-looking coin into a remarkable chapter of American numismatic history. Last coin. The 1990 D Washington quarter is the kind of coin that millions of Americans have handled without a second thought, yet seasoned collectors often pause the moment they encounter a particularly well-preserved example. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than another circulating quarter from the closing years of the 20th century, but careful examination tells a far more interesting story. Every mark, every detail of the strike, every trace of original luster, and even the tiny D mint mark beneath the date can reveal whether the coin is simply common or worthy of serious attention. That distinction is what transforms an everyday pocket coin into an object of genuine numismatic interest. As we examine this issue together, you'll discover why authenticated examples in exceptional condition have earned respect within the collecting community, how specialists determine their desirability, and what notable certified pieces have achieved in the marketplace under the right circumstances. To understand the importance of the 1990 D quarter, it helps to step back into the America that produced it. The nation was entering a new decade marked by technological progress, shifting global politics, and growing economic uncertainty. The Cold War was nearing its conclusion, the Berlin Wall had recently fallen, and financial markets were adjusting to a rapidly changing international landscape. Through all of those historic developments, the Washington quarter remained one of the most familiar coins in daily commerce. Unlike commemorative issues created for special occasions, the 1990 D quarter was struck simply because the country needed quarters for everyday transactions. It became part of countless ordinary moments: parking meters, vending machines, grocery stores, laundromats, and cash registers, without anyone imagining that a small percentage of these coins would eventually attract the attention of advanced collectors. Sometimes the most historically meaningful coins are not those created to celebrate history, but those that quietly witness it through constant circulation. The investigation naturally turns to the Denver Mint, where every genuine 1990 D quarter received its distinctive D Mint mark. Located in Colorado, the Denver facility had built a reputation for producing enormous quantities of circulating coinage while maintaining generally strong manufacturing standards. During 1990, it struck hundreds of millions of Washington quarters to satisfy national demand, making the issue common in terms of overall production. The coin itself followed the standard specifications established after the transition away from silver in 1965. Each piece was struck on a copper core clad with outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel, resulting in a total weight of approximately 5.67 grams and a diameter of 24.3 millimeters. The reeded edge remained unchanged, preserving compatibility with vending equipment and commercial machinery throughout the country. On the obverse, John Flanagan's enduring portrait of George Washington continued to symbolize leadership and national unity, while the reverse displayed the heraldic eagle perched upon arrows framed by olive branches, expressing the balance between military strength and peace that had defined the design for generations. Once the historical foundation is understood, experienced collectors begin looking beyond basic identification and focus on the characteristics that truly separate one example from another. The first examination usually starts with the date and mint mark, confirming that the D is original and not altered. Attention then shifts to strike quality. Although Denver generally produced well-struck quarters during this era, subtle differences exist because dies gradually wore during high-volume production. Collectors study Washington's hair, the lettering, the eagle's breast feathers, and the sharpness of the wreath to determine whether the coin displays above-average detail. Original mint luster is equally important. A freshly struck coin reflects light in a distinctive cartwheel pattern created by microscopic metal flow lines during striking. Once that surface is disturbed by circulation, cleaning, or improper storage, much of its collector appeal can disappear. Eye appeal, often difficult to describe but immediately recognized by experienced numismatists, becomes the combination of strike, luster, originality, and surface preservation that determines whether a coin stands out from thousands of similar examples. Professional grading transforms those visual observations into recognized standards. Coins certified by respected grading services are evaluated according to the Sheldon scale, where every numerical increase represents a meaningful improvement in preservation. Because the overwhelming majority of 1990D quarters entered circulation immediately, most surviving examples exhibit contact marks, worn high points, and diminished luster. Truly pristine pieces are much less common than the original mintage suggests. Registry collectors, pursuing top-ranked Washington quarter sets, compete aggressively for coins certified in the highest mint state grades because population reports reveal just how few survive with virtually flawless surfaces. Under current market conditions, an authenticated mint state example displaying exceptional originality, strong strike quality, and outstanding eye appeal may trade in the neighborhood of approximately $1,420 to $2,180, although actual values depend upon certification, current demand, and the availability of similarly graded specimens. The difference between an ordinary uncirculated coin and one occupying the highest certified grades can be substantial, illustrating why grading expertise plays such an essential role in modern numismatics. The investigation becomes even more interesting when the possibility of mint errors and die varieties enters the discussion. Collectors are naturally drawn toward production mistakes because they represent unusual moments in the manufacturing process that escaped quality control. Documented error types for modern Washington quarters include off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, and other genuine mint-made anomalies that have been authenticated by leading grading services. However, it is equally important to recognize what cannot be confirmed. Reliable references do not identify any famous, widely recognized major die variety unique to the standard 1990D Washington quarter that consistently commands extraordinary premiums across the hobby. That distinction matters because unsupported claims frequently circulate online. Experienced numismatists rely on documented research rather than speculation, carefully measuring weight, diameter, metallic composition, and design characteristics before concluding that a coin represents a legitimate mint error. Authenticated examples displaying significant production errors, combined with strong preservation and certification, have reached collector prices roughly between $2,850 and $3,900, but those results belong only to verified error coins rather than ordinary circulation strikes. Auction history reinforces an important lesson about rarity. Spectacular prices are almost never driven by the date alone. Instead, they reflect the convergence of exceptional preservation, low certified populations, strong collector demand, and occasionally an important authenticated error. Finest known survivors often spent little or no time in circulation, preserving brilliant mint luster and sharply defined details that distinguish them from the countless examples worn through everyday use. Registry set competition has intensified interest in these elite coins because collectors striving for the highest ranked certified sets must pursue a very limited number of top-grade specimens. Whenever impressive auction records are reported, they should always be viewed within that context. They do not establish the value of every 1990D quarter found in change, nor do they suggest that all examples share equal rarity. Responsible market analysis depends upon verified certification, population data, auction provenance, and careful comparison with previously sold examples rather than assumptions based solely on the date and mint mark. The enduring appeal of the 1990D Washington quarter ultimately comes from the way it rewards careful observation instead of quick conclusions. Proper preservation remains essential for anyone fortunate enough to encounter an unusually well-preserved specimen. Coins should be handled only by their edges, stored in inert archival holders or rigid capsules, and protected from humidity, fingerprints, and abrasive cleaning, all of which permanently alter original surfaces. Artificial polishing, chemical treatment, or aggressive wiping almost always reduces collector desirability rather than improving it. When a coin appears exceptionally sharp, unusually lustrous, or potentially displays a genuine production error, professional authentication provides the most reliable path toward understanding its place in the marketplace. More than 3 decades after it left the Denver Mint, the 1990D Washington quarter continues to remind collectors that true rarity often hides behind familiar designs, waiting for someone willing to look beyond the ordinary. Sometimes, the next remarkable discovery begins with the coin everyone else overlooked.